You don't overthink because you're dramatic. You don't spiral because you crave attention. You do it because your nervous system was forced to adapt to chaos, abandonment, or pressure without the safety net you deserved. That mental noise, the rehearsing, the rechecking, the constant scanning, it's not noise at all. It's protection, hypervigilance in disguise. A mind doing everything it can to stay one step ahead of pain. At some point you were left alone with too much emotion, too much responsibility, too much silence, and no one helped you carry it. So your brain took over. It started running simulations, playing out threats, crafting exits and explanations for scenarios that hadn't even happened. Not because you're broken, but because you learned early and deeply that preparedness was safety. This is what people misunderstand. Overthinking isn't a flaw in character. It's a reflection of experience. It's the echo of a child who had to become their own anchor. It's the survival strategy of someone who didn't feel safe unless they anticipated everything. You weren't born this way. You adapted. And adaptation is strength, even if it now feels like a burden. But here's the truth. What once kept you safe might now be keeping you stuck. That survival strategy isn't bad, it's just outdated. And healing doesn't mean silencing your thoughts. It means teaching your nervous system that it's finally safe to rest. Not by force, not by shame, but through compassion, patience, and unlearning what no longer serves you. Overthinking doesn't come out of nowhere. It's a response to threat. It begins the moment your nervous system stops feeling safe. When your environment lacks stability, care, or emotional attunement, your mind steps in to compensate. It starts trying to create control where there is none. That control comes in the form of constant thinking, analyzing, predicting, rehearsing. Not because you're obsessive, because at some point your survival depended on staying ahead of pain. For many people, this began in childhood, when your emotional needs were unmet, when love was inconsistent, criticism was constant, or the rules kept changing. Your brain adapted. It became hypervigilant. You learned to anticipate people's moods, to stay small and agreeable, to scan for danger in tone, silence, or facial expressions. Your nervous system wired itself around the question, what do I need to do to stay safe here? That's where the overthinking took root, not in your personality, but in your physiology. You weren't taught how to feel safe, how to co-regulate, how to rest in trust. So your mind took over the role that soothing, supportive relationships should have played. It began running endless mental simulations to protect you. What if they get mad? What if I fail? What if I say the wrong thing? These weren't just thoughts. They were shields. And that shield was smart, adaptive, necessary. It helped you survive emotional chaos, unpredictability, or neglect. It gave you a sense of control when everything else felt out of your hands. So when people casually say, just stop overthinking, they completely miss the point. Overthinking isn't a quirk, it's protection. A lifelong habit built on the belief that if I can predict everything, I won't get hurt. This habit didn't grow in a vacuum. It was born in environments where you were emotionally alone, even if people were physically there. Environments where your needs were too big, your emotions too inconvenient, your presence too much to handle. Overthinking became the way you stayed small, stayed safe, stayed acceptable. You started thinking for everyone else because no one taught you it was safe to think for yourself. So no, your mind didn't betray you. It didn't become a noisy mess because something went wrong. It stepped in when no one else did. It carried the weight that others should have helped you hold. That's not weakness, that's survival. And now the healing isn't about killing the overthinking. It's about teaching your mind and body that the war is over and it's finally safe to rest. But real safety isn't something you manufacture in your head. It's something you feel in your body, and it's built through connection. As a child, safety is supposed to come from consistent emotional presence. Someone seeing you, hearing you, holding space for your feelings without judgment. But when that kind of emotional attunement is absent, your brain improvises. It builds a backup plan, and that backup plan is control. When love feels conditional or chaos is the norm, you start trying to manage everything: conversations, outcomes, tone shifts, people's reactions. Why? Because unpredictability hurts. So your brain learns, if I can predict everything, I might avoid pain. That's not neurosis, that's adaptation. That's a nervous system learning how to survive emotional disconnection. Control becomes your armor. Overthinkers weren't born neurotic. They were wired into hyper-control because it gave them the illusion of safety. When you couldn't rely on caregivers to attune to your needs, you turned inward. You started running every scenario, every interaction, every possible failure, not because you're dramatic, but because you were alone. And your brain decided, I'll keep us safe by thinking through every threat before it happens. But control is a poor replacement for connection. It keeps you alert, but it never lets you rest. It makes you feel responsible for everything: your emotions, other people's moods, the outcome of every situation. That kind of responsibility wasn't yours to carry, but your nervous system never learned the difference. So now, even in safe relationships or calm situations, your brain keeps scanning, planning, preparing. The painful irony is this: the very control that once protected you now isolates you. It keeps you locked in your head, disconnected from your body, suspicious of stillness. You may crave deep connection, but overthinking becomes a barrier to it. You second-guess intimacy, sabotage rest, and interpret uncertainty as danger, all because your system never got the message that connection is safe. So let's name it for what it is. This isn't dysfunction. This is survival in disguise. Your nervous system equated thinking with safety because connection once felt unsafe or unavailable. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you adaptive. But now it's time to ask a harder question. Does this still serve me? Because healing won't come from controlling more. It will come from slowly, bravely learning to reconnect. Overthinking can feel like control, like clarity, like you're doing something about the chaos inside. But beneath the surface, it's often just a clever form of self-abandonment. It disconnects you from the one place where healing actually happens: your body. When you overthink, you're not being too much, you're just leaving yourself, escaping the emotions your nervous system was never taught how to hold. Here's why: the body stores pain. It holds memories, grief, fear, shame, anger in muscle, breath, gut. And if no one ever taught you how to feel those safely, your mind jumps in and hijacks the process. It drags you into loops and stories, not because you're weak, but because emotional stillness feels unbearable. Your system decided long ago, feeling is unsafe. Thinking is safer, so you start analyzing instead of expressing. You ask why over and over instead of asking, what do I feel? You break every emotion down into logic, strategy, meaning, anything but just sitting in it. You rationalize your sadness, you explain away your anger. You create entire thought mazes to avoid one thing: actually feeling. This is the brain trying to solve a wound the body is still carrying, and it looks productive. It feels smart. That's the trap. It makes you think you're working through your pain, when in reality, you're just circling around it, never touching the core. You think the spiraling is progress, but it's often just avoidance in disguise. Logic becomes the mask that hides emotional neglect, not from others but from yourself. That's what self-abandonment looks like, leaving your body to live in your head, not because you're broken, but because no one gave you the tools to stay. You weren't taught how to feel your way through pain, just how to manage it, suppress it, intellectualize it. So your emotions were exiled, your body became the battlefield, and your mind took on a role it was never meant to carry alone. Your mind is loud because your emotions were never allowed to be. That's the truth. And healing begins not with silencing the thoughts, but with reclaiming the emotions underneath them. You don't need to think more clearly. You need to feel more safely. That's the work, returning to your body, emotion by emotion, and learning to stay this time. Overthinkers tend to carry not just their own emotional load, but everyone else's too. They scan for tension in the room, read between every line of a text, replay conversations endlessly, not because they want to, but because their nervous system was wired to believe, if I don't manage everything, something will go wrong. This pattern doesn't come from nowhere. It's usually born in childhood roles, the peacemaker, the fixer, the little adult. Maybe you had to calm volatile parents, absorb other people's moods, or shrink yourself to keep the peace. Maybe you were rewarded for being easy or responsible, and punished even subtly for expressing needs or making mistakes. So your brain drew a powerful conclusion. My safety depends on keeping everyone else okay. That's why now, even in adulthood, your mind keeps running background scripts like, did I upset them? Should I have said something differently? What more could I have done? These aren't just random thoughts. They're the echoes of an identity you had to adopt to survive, an identity where your worth was tied to emotional labor, self-silencing, and overperformance. The cruel twist is that this hyper-responsibility often gets praised. People see you as thoughtful, reliable, so strong. But what they don't see is the anxiety underneath, the exhaustion of always being on, always trying to prevent disaster, always believing it's your job to hold the world together. What they call admirable is often just your trauma dressed in people-pleasing. And here's the hardest truth. This isn't just your personality. It's a defense, a deeply intelligent, adaptive one, but a defense nonetheless. You weren't born feeling like it was your job to carry everyone's emotions. You learned that. And because no one came to carry you, your brain decided you had to be the one to hold it all. So no, you're not too sensitive. You're not overthinking everything. You're operating from a survival strategy built in the middle of chaos. The work now is to slowly unlearn this false sense of responsibility and give yourself permission to be fully human, messy, flawed, and free to take up space without needing to earn it by managing everyone else's peace. You can be safe on paper, stable job, supportive partner, no immediate crisis, and still feel like something's about to go wrong. That's not because you're irrational. It's because your nervous system hasn't caught up to your reality. It's still bracing for impact, stuck in fight or flight, preparing for the next hit even when there's no threat in sight. Overthinking, in this context, is your brain's desperate attempt to stay ahead of invisible danger. This is what many people don't understand. Your nervous system doesn't respond to facts. It responds to felt safety. It doesn't care about your logic or your calendar. It cares about cues. And if you've spent years in survival mode, in trauma, instability, emotional neglect, your body learned to be hypervigilant. It learned that danger can come at any moment, and no one is coming to help. That pattern doesn't just turn off because your circumstances change. So when your body still feels unsafe, your mind tries to fix it. It spirals, it scans, it analyzes everything, tone, silence, body language, future outcomes. Not because it wants drama, but because it's trying to create control where your nervous system feels none. This is why reassurance doesn't stick. Why logic doesn't soothe. Because safety isn't a thought. It's a physiological state. And until your body feels that safety, your brain will keep ringing the alarm. That's why healing can't just happen in your head. Insight is helpful, but it's not enough. You can understand why you're anxious and still feel trapped by it. Real healing happens when the body learns to downshift. When the nervous system starts to recognize moment by moment, I am not in danger anymore. That requires slow, consistent regulation, breath work, grounding, co-regulation, rest, not as techniques to fix anxiety, but as experiences that teach your body what safety feels like. You may be physically safe, but emotionally wired for danger. That's the dissonance. And until you close that gap, until your body gets the memo that it's allowed to soften, your mind will keep working overtime to protect you. Overthinking is often the symptom. Dysregulation is the root. This doesn't make you weak. It makes you a survivor whose nervous system just hasn't had a chance to exhale yet. So the work isn't to force your mind to stop overthinking. It's to teach your body how to feel safe again, slowly, gently, repeatedly. Because when the body remembers that the threat is over, the mind finally gets to rest too. Not through willpower, but through reconnection. One breath, one moment, one safe experience at a time. You will never heal overthinking by trying to stop it. You can't logic your way out of it. You can't bully it into silence. And you sure as hell can't shame it into submission. That's like yelling at a smoke alarm to stop screaming while the system still believes the house is on fire. Overthinking isn't a malfunction, it's a response. If you want it to loosen its grip, you have to go to the source, the fear underneath. Overthinking is trying to protect you. That's the part most people miss. It's the nervous system saying, we're not safe. Stay alert. Don't relax yet. Trying to stop that with discipline or self-judgment only reinforces the message that something's wrong with you. But nothing is wrong with you. You're responding exactly as any human would when they've been wired by past instability, trauma, or emotional isolation. This isn't a flaw. It's a pattern, and patterns can be unwound. To begin that unwinding, you need to stop seeing overthinking as your enemy and start seeing it as a signal, a request for safety, a cry from a younger part of you that still doesn't feel safe to relax. That's where healing begins, not with rejection, but with recognition. What is this fear trying to tell me? What am I trying to control? What am I terrified might happen if I let go? The tools aren't complicated, but they require consistency. Mindful self-awareness helps you observe the overthinking without fusing with it. Somatic practices help you regulate your body and teach your nervous system what calm feels like. Emotional reconnection helps you feel what you've been avoiding, not to drown in it, but to integrate it. And safe relationships give you the experience of being held without having to perform, fix, or scan for danger. Letting go of perfectionism is key, because overthinking often comes from the belief that if I just get it right, I'll be safe. That belief has to die. Not because you're giving up, but because real safety doesn't come from perfect control. It comes from inner trust, from knowing you can handle life even when it's messy, and from letting yourself be human, uncertain, emotional, and still enough. You've spent so long inside your head that silence feels threatening. You equate stillness with danger, uncertainty with failure, rest with irresponsibility. But here's the truth your nervous system needs to hear. You are allowed to stop thinking. You are allowed to not have it all figured out. You are allowed to make mistakes and still be worthy of love and peace. Overthinking helped you survive, but it's not the path to freedom. For most of your life, your brain was doing what your environment couldn't, keeping you safe. So it stayed busy, hyper-aware, always calculating, always solving. But peace isn't found in the next plan, the next explanation, the next answer. It's found in the space you were never given, the space to pause, to be uncertain, and to still feel held. And you can give yourself that now, slowly, intentionally. Rest isn't laziness. It's a nervous system recalibrating after years of tension. It's a body saying, enough? It's not weakness, it's the foundation for strength that isn't built on fear. Slowing down is not giving up. It's choosing to stop letting anxiety run the show. And no one needs that more than the person who was taught that survival depends on being on all the time. This is the new language of safety. Breathe instead of spiral. Ground instead of fix. Feel instead of analyze. It will feel unfamiliar, uncomfortable, even. But every time you choose presence over panic, you are rewiring the trauma. You are telling your brain something it never got to believe before. We're safe now. You don't have to keep watching the door. Overthinking is not your identity. It's not the essence of who you are. It's a survival map, a set of routes your mind created to navigate dangerous terrain, but it's not your destination. So step into this truth with courage. Your past shaped you, but it does not define you. You are more than your coping mechanisms. You are a resilient, evolving being, capable of deep peace, connection, and freedom. And that freedom starts now.